My name is Nora Bennett. The knife tapped rhythmically against the cutting board, each slice of cucumber falling into a neat row. The sound was steady, almost comforting, until my phone lit up beside the sink. A message from my son Ethan, one photo of a dinner table. Everyone was there. Ethan, his wife Sloane, her parents, and little Milo sitting on his grandfather's lap. Laughter frozen in a frame from the Juniper Room, the restaurant I had once dreamed of visiting on my own birthday. I stared at the picture until the steam from the pot blurred my vision. No caption, no invitation, not even a "wish you were here." The silence in my kitchen felt heavier than any words could. I placed the phone face down and turned off the stove. The house smelled faintly of dill and disappointment. For a long moment, I stood motionless, hands trembling slightly. Then I whispered to the empty room, "They didn't even think to ask." That realization hurt more than anger ever could. I wiped my hands on a towel, looked around the spotless kitchen I'd cleaned for years, and finally exhaled. Tonight would be the last time I waited by the phone for someone else to include me. After my husband, Arthur, passed away 5 years earlier, I had moved into my son's house, just for a while. Ethan and his wife Sloane had been juggling new jobs, a mortgage, and a newborn. It felt natural to help. I told myself it would be temporary, until Milo started preschool. Maybe a year at most. Years slipped by like pages in a book no one finished reading. I became the quiet rhythm of the household. The lunches packed before dawn, the shirts pressed, the soup simmering before anyone walked in. I was the reason things ran smoothly, yet no one seemed to notice. At first, I didn't mind. Helping my family gave me a sense of purpose. Watching Milo grow filled my evenings with laughter and warmth. But lately, that laughter had started to sound distant, muffled by closed doors and whispered plans I wasn't part of. Sloane had begun saying "we" in a way that excluded me. We decided to repaint. We thought you'd be more comfortable downstairs. We figured you wouldn't enjoy those parties. Each sentence chipped away at something inside me. Arthur had once told me, "Families don't always fall apart with shouting. Sometimes they fade with politeness." I didn't understand it then. Now I did. That evening, as I washed the last dish, I caught my reflection in the dark kitchen window. Tired eyes, silver threads in my hair, a woman who had given everything and slowly vanished from her own life. Maybe I had stayed too long. Maybe it was time to stop being the background of someone else's story. The next morning, I packed a small roller bag, careful not to wake anyone. I folded my clothes neatly, slid Arthur's watch into a side pocket, and placed a note on the kitchen counter. It read simply, "Gone to stay with Ruth for a few days. Don't worry." I hesitated before signing my name, then added one more line. "Please take care of Milo." Outside, the air was cool and gray. The taxi I called idled quietly at the curb. As it pulled away, I looked back once at the house I had turned into a home for everyone but myself. Curtains drawn, porch light still on, a symbol of my endless waiting. The ride to Ruth Delgado's apartment took 30 minutes. Ruth, a retired nurse and my closest friend, opened the door before I could knock. One look at my face was enough. "You don't need to explain," she said softly. "You can stay as long as you need." We sat at her kitchen table with 2 mugs of coffee between us. I told her everything, the photo, the forced distance, the quiet ache of being needed but never wanted. Ruth listened, her brow furrowing. "Then tomorrow," she said, "we'll go find out exactly what they've been doing behind your back." I nodded. The fear that had clung to my chest began to loosen. For the first time in years, I was no longer waiting for someone to save me. I had finally taken the first step myself. The next morning, Ruth and I took the early bus to Maple Court, the old brick building where I had lived for nearly 40 years before moving in with Ethan. The neighborhood looked both familiar and foreign. The bakery on the corner was gone, replaced by a sleek cafe with glass walls. Even the air smelled different, like espresso and asphalt instead of rain and bread. When we reached the building, I stood for a moment on the cracked sidewalk, staring up at the faded shutters. My heart clenched. I could still picture Arthur painting that second-floor window himself, whistling off-key while Ethan, 10 years old, begged to help. The lobby was dim and quiet. A notice board hung near the mailboxes, cluttered with leaflets and flyers. But one large document stood out in the center. A printed letter stamped in red. Notice of redevelopment and demolition. I leaned closer. The paper stated that all current property owners had to submit verification forms within 2 weeks to qualify for compensation. My name was still listed as a joint owner. My pulse quickened. I turned to Ruth. No one told me about this. An older neighbor, Miss Lang, shuffled by and paused. Oh, Nora, I thought you'd moved away for good. Your son came by last week. Said you were too ill to handle the paperwork. Such a pity, dear. I froze. He said what? Mrs. Lang frowned. He had some documents with him. Told the inspector everything was under control. My fingers tightened around my purse. I felt the air leave my lungs. All those years of trust, and now this, a quiet betrayal sealed with my own son's pen. I looked back at the old building one last time. If they thought I wouldn't come back, I whispered, they were wrong. That afternoon, Ruth and I went straight to the community development office downtown. The building was bright and sterile, the kind of place where every voice seemed to echo. A young clerk in a navy vest greeted us politely and asked for my identification. When I handed over my old deed papers, the clerk scanned them, then typed my name into the computer. Yes, Mrs. Bennett, your unit is part of the Maple Court redevelopment project. The compensation package for your property is listed at $315,000. I blinked. I never agreed to sell anything, the clerk frowned. It says here your son submitted authorization forms on your behalf. He provided a power of attorney and signature copies. My stomach dropped. Can I see those forms, please? The clerk hesitated, but eventually handed me the file. There it was. My name, my handwriting, or at least something that tried to look like it. The loops were wrong, the slope too sharp. My voice trembled. This isn't my signature. Ruth leaned closer, her tone steady but firm. So what happens if this is fraudulent? The clerk looked uneasy. If it's proven false, the sale can't go through. You'll need to file a verification request. I nodded slowly, feeling the blood rush in my ears. I flipped through the rest of the folder and noticed a sticky note with neat handwriting. It read, basement room for mom, close to kitchen, easy access. The words hit me like a slap. That's what my son had planned. A windowless room beneath his new house, while he cashed in the home Arthur and I had built from decades of sacrifice. I closed the file gently, my hands no longer shaking. Thank you, I said quietly to the clerk. As we walked out into the afternoon light, Ruth caught my arm. You okay? I looked straight ahead. No, I said, but I'm done pretending I am. That evening, I sat at Ruth's kitchen table with the papers spread out before her. The numbers, the stamps, the false signature, it all felt unreal, like a cruel trick. For a long time, I didn't speak. Then Ruth called her nephew, who worked as a paralegal, and put him on speaker. He listened patiently as I explained what had happened. When I finished, his voice was calm and firm. Ms. Bennett, if your name is on the title, your consent is legally required for any sale. A forged power of attorney doesn't hold up in court. You have more power than you think, I exhaled slowly. More power than I thought. For the first time, those words didn't sound foreign. Following his advice, I drafted a short letter that night. Simple and clear. I revoked any power of attorney that had been filed in my name and requested a full investigation. Ruth helped me scan and send the documents to the office before midnight. When I finished, I stared at the sent confirmation on the screen. A strange calm washed over me. I picked up my phone and typed a message to Ethan. I'll be staying at Maple Court for a few days. I'll handle all future paperwork myself. No anger, no accusations, just boundaries. Quiet, precise, unshakable. Ruth smiled faintly. That's the Nora I remember. I looked down at my hands. They weren't trembling anymore. Maybe it's the one I've been waiting to remember, too. 2 nights later, I returned to Ethan's house to collect a few personal items. The house was quiet, the kind of silence that felt rehearsed. I moved carefully through the hallway, my footsteps soft on the carpet. As I passed by the study, I heard voices, low, urgent, unmistakably Ethan and Sloane. "She's serious," Sloane whispered. "If she won't sign, the compensation's going to be delayed for months." Ethan's tone was tense. "I'm handling it. She just needs time to cool off," Sloane scoffed. "We don't have time. The buyer's waiting. If we have to, we will keep Milo away until she gives in. She'll fold eventually." Something inside me cracked. My breath caught, my pulse racing in my temples. I took one unsteady step back, and my elbow brushed the umbrella stand. The sound was small but sharp enough to freeze the room. The study door opened. Ethan's face drained of color. "Mom." For a second, the three of us just stared at each other. Ethan pale. Sloane defiant. Me trembling. "I heard enough," I said quietly. My voice was thin but steady. "Don't worry, you'll get what you deserve." Before Ethan could reply, the edges of my vision blurred. A sharp pain shot through the side of my head. The room tilted, then dissolved into darkness. When I opened my eyes again, there was light, bright, sterile, and cold. The rhythmic beeping of a monitor replaced the echo of my son's voice. I realized where I was only when I saw the hospital bracelet around my wrist. My name, printed in black letters, reminded me of the one thing no one could forge: my will to survive. When I woke again, the world was wrapped in soft beeps and whispers. The faint smell of disinfectant filled the air. My body felt heavy, my tongue dry. For a moment, I didn't know where I was. Then I saw Ethan slumped in the chair beside my bed, face pale, eyes red from lack of sleep. He noticed me stirring and stood up quickly. "Mom, you scared me." His voice cracked, and for the first time in years, it didn't sound defensive. It sounded small. I looked at him quietly. "I'm fine," I murmured, though the word didn't feel true. A nurse entered, checked my vitals, and smiled kindly. "You've got visitors, Mrs. Bennett. Shall I let them in?" 2 familiar figures appeared in the doorway. Mr. Whitaker, my calligraphy instructor from the community center, holding a small bouquet of wildflowers, and May Turner, his outspoken assistant, carrying a thermos of homemade soup. May grinned. "You think a little hospital stay's getting you out of homework?" "Not happening." For the first time in days, I managed a weak smile. Mr. Whitaker placed the flowers on my nightstand. "Ink and paper can wait. You just rest, my dear. The world isn't going anywhere." When they left, Ethan watched them go, confused. "They're your friends?" I nodded. "People I've known 2 weeks," I said softly. "And they showed up?" Ethan lowered his head, unable to answer. Respect, I thought, wasn't about blood. It was about who came when you needed them most. 2 days later, when I was strong enough to sit up, Sloane appeared at the hospital with a bouquet of expensive lilies and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. Ethan trailed behind her, holding a folder. "We just want to make things right," Sloane began, setting the flowers on the table. "The developers are waiting, and you've been through a lot. Ethan and I talked, and we think a fair arrangement would be giving you 20% of the payout. That way, everyone benefits." I looked at her without blinking. 20%. "It's generous," Sloane said quickly, "considering we're doing all the handling. You'd still live with us, of course. We'll take care of everything." Ethan's eyes darted to the floor. He didn't speak. I reached for a glass of water, my movements deliberate and calm. "Sloane," I said quietly, "I don't want what isn't mine, but I also won't give up what is." Sloane's jaw tightened. "So you'd rather ruin everything?" I took a sip, then met her gaze. "I'm not ruining anything. I'm setting it right." Silence stretched between us until Ethan finally said, "Maybe we should go." As they left, I turned toward the window. Outside, the city moved on. Cars, people, lives intersecting without pause. I didn't feel angry anymore, just clear. Some storms, I realized, were meant to wash away illusions, not people. A week later, the doctor finally cleared me for discharge. My right hand was still weak, but I could walk short distances with support. Ethan came to pick me up alone. The ride home was quiet. Sunlight flashed between the trees as the car moved through the suburbs, and my reflection in the window looked like a stranger. Older, yes, but steadier too. When we arrived, the house was spotless. A vase of fresh tulips sat on the dining table, and Sloane, wearing a practiced smile, came out of the kitchen. "Welcome home, Mom," she said softly. "I made chicken soup." I nodded. "Thank you." We sat down to eat. The silence was thick but not hostile. Halfway through the meal, Ethan cleared his throat. "Mom, we talked about the compensation again. We want to be fair." Sloane slid a printed sheet across the table. "1/3 for you," she said. "That's $100,000. The rest goes toward the new house. You'll have your own room upstairs with sunlight." I studied the numbers and the deed. Ethan hesitated. "We'll include your name, too. Equal ownership." For a moment, no one spoke. I looked at both of them, my son, tired but sincere, and Sloane, struggling between pride and guilt. "Then we'll do it," I said finally. "But I'll need something else in return." Sloane's shoulders tensed. "What is it?" I placed my spoon down. "My independence. From now on, I live my life on my terms. You take care of your family. I'll take care of me." Sloane looked startled, but Ethan only nodded. "That's fair," he said quietly. The next morning, I stood in the garden, the soft scent of tulips still hanging in the air, my cane pressed lightly into the soil as I breathed in the crisp morning wind. For the first time in months, I didn't feel trapped by the walls of my own home. I felt awake. Later that day, Ethan joined me on the porch, holding a folder. "Mom, here's the final paperwork. The agreement's ready for your signature. But before you sign," he hesitated, his expression serious. "Are you sure you're okay with this arrangement? 1/3 joint ownership and living here with us?" I looked at the horizon, my eyes soft but steady. "No," I said simply. Ethan blinked. "No?" "I've been thinking," I continued, turning to face him. "I want to use my share differently. There's a senior living community near the lake, Silverwood Gardens. I visited before the stroke. They have calligraphy classes, gardens, and even music nights. I want to move there." Ethan's mouth opened, then closed again. "You mean live there permanently?" "For now," I said. "Maybe 3 months to start. I need space to find myself again." He ran a hand through his hair, struggling to process it. "Mom, you don't have to go away. We can take care of you," I smiled gently. "You've taken enough care of me, Ethan. It's time I take care of myself." My voice was calm, but there was power in it, a quiet, resolute kind. Ethan lowered his gaze. "If that's what you want, it is," I said. "And this time, it's my signature, my choice." 3 months later, sunlight streamed through the wide glass windows of my new apartment at Silverwood Gardens. The air smelled faintly of jasmine and ink. On my small desk, a half-finished calligraphy scroll read 4 simple words: "Free and at peace." My right hand, though slower than before, moved with grace again. Every morning, I joined Mr. Whitaker's class, where laughter and the soft scratch of brushes filled the room. May brought me tea during breaks, always joking that my handwriting looked better than the teacher's. I smiled more now. I had my own rhythm: morning stretches, afternoon art, evening walks by the lake. Sometimes I caught myself humming while painting, a habit I'd forgotten I ever had. One Saturday, the center hosted an open house for families. Children ran between tables, and the elderly residents proudly showed their crafts. I stood by my calligraphy display when I heard a familiar voice. "Mom." Ethan was there, holding a small bouquet of daisies, Leo clutching his hand. The boy ran up and hugged my waist. "Grandma? Daddy said you're teaching him to write." "That's right," I said, ruffling his hair. "Next week, we'll start with your name." Ethan looked around, taking in the art, the laughter, the calm glow on my face. "You seem happy," he said quietly. "I am," I answered. "For the first time in years, I feel like myself." Ethan nodded, his eyes glistening. Then I think Dad would be proud. I looked toward the window, the afternoon sun spilling gold across my table. Maybe, I said softly, but mostly I'm proud of me. That evening, after the event ended and the guests had gone home, I sat on the balcony with a cup of chamomile tea. The lake shimmered under the fading light. Dragonflies skimmed across its surface. From the common room below, I could still hear the faint sound of piano music and laughter. For years, my life had revolved around others. My husband, my son, my grandson. Every meal cooked, every bill paid, every sacrifice made quietly in the name of love. But now, for the first time, love didn't mean losing myself. My phone buzzed. It was a message from Ethan. Mom, thank you for today. Leo won't stop talking about your art. Sloane said she wants to visit next time, too. We're proud of you. I smiled, my eyes soft. For once, those words didn't come wrapped in guilt or obligation. They were genuine. I typed back, I'm proud of you too, Ethan. Tell Leo Grandma loves him. And tell Sloane she's always welcome. After sending the message, I leaned back and gazed at the stars emerging one by one. I thought of Arthur, his steady hands, his quiet laughter, the life we'd built. He would have told me this moment was long overdue. On the small table beside me lay my journal. I opened to a fresh page and wrote, Freedom isn't rebellion. It's peace. It's choosing to live, not just survive. Closing the book, I whispered into the night, Thank you, Arthur, for everything. The wind stirred the pages gently, carrying my words away, soft but certain, like ink drying on paper. And somewhere deep inside, I knew this wasn't an ending. It was the beginning I'd been waiting for all along. A year later, Silverwood Gardens was hosting its annual Art Across Generations festival. Paintings, sculptures, and calligraphy adorned every wall, each piece telling the story of someone who had lived, lost, and learned to begin again. I stood near my display, 3 large scrolls written in my confident, flowing script. One read, Harmony Within. Another said, Strength and Stillness. The final one, bold and simple, bore just 2 words, Begin Again. Visitors lingered, admiring my work. Mr. Whitaker stood proudly beside me, telling anyone who would listen that I had become the heart of the community's art program. I only laughed and waved off the compliments. Then, in the crowd, I saw Ethan and Sloane hand in hand, with Leo skipping ahead, carrying a small calligraphy brush and a gift box. Grandma, Leo called out. Look what Daddy bought me so I can write like you. I knelt, hugging him tightly. Then you'll have to practice every day, young man. Calligraphy takes patience. Sloane smiled, a real one this time. He's been begging for lessons. Maybe we could join one of your weekend workshops. I'd love that, I said warmly. As we toured the exhibition together, Ethan whispered, Mom, I get it now. Independence doesn't mean distance. It means respect. I met his eyes and nodded. Exactly. When the event ended, I returned to my apartment. The evening sun glowed through my window, lighting up my writing desk. I picked up my brush, dipped it in ink, and began a new piece. Each stroke was steady and sure, rooted in loss, shaped by strength, and alive with quiet joy. Because revenge, I realized, had never been the goal. Peace was. And I had finally, gracefully painted my way there. Later that night, I sat by my window, the moon hanging low above the quiet gardens. My newest calligraphy piece lay before me, the ink still glistening under the soft lamplight. It read, Peace is not given, it's created. I smiled faintly. For so long, I had believed peace would come when others finally treated me right, when my son respected me, when my daughter-in-law understood me, when life stopped testing me. But peace, I now realized, began the moment I stopped waiting for permission to live as myself. Every woman, I thought, reaches a point when silence is no longer noble and endurance is no longer love. That point is not the end. It's the beginning. My phone buzzed again. This time a picture from Ethan. Leo was proudly showing his first calligraphy strokes. Uneven, messy, but full of life. The caption read, He says Grandma taught him the most important thing: never give up. Tears filled my eyes, not from sadness, but from the beautiful fullness of it all. The pain, the betrayal, the rediscovery, it had all led here, to this quiet, complete moment. I whispered to myself, maybe forgiveness isn't forgetting. Maybe it's freeing yourself to move forward. Turning off the lamp, I looked once more at my artwork, then out into the night. The wind carried the scent of jasmine and new beginnings, and to everyone watching this story, I'd say, don't wait for someone else to hand you peace. Create it. Find your own strength, your own joy, and your own life, no matter your age. Because starting over isn't just possible, it's art. Like, share and tell us, what does peace mean to you?